It's hard to find a city in the South that is more in tune with its history than Savannah. That is quite a statement considering how much history there is across the South. It is hard to travel anywhere in this region of America without stepping back in time almost everywhere. In Atlanta, you don't see it as much because of just how massive that city is. But if you step away from the heart of the city, for example, into Decatur, then the history pops right back into your face. Even in Florida, in its capital city of Tallahassee, which is much younger by comparison to the rest of the South, there are buildings like this, an old power plant that used to supply power to most of the city. Now it's a gorgeous restaurant called the Edison. We featured them on our show a while back, one of the prettiest faces I've seen in all the South, and that is saying something. Of course, we know all about it in this area here. It's a large part of the reason why we get 14 million plus tourists here every single year. Yes, they come for so many reasons, food, hospitality, and natural beauty, of course, but they are also obviously fascinated by the history. It's everywhere here, even if there isn't a fancy plaque telling you what you're looking at. Almost every building downtown has a story. Like what, you ask? Well, any of the hotels, really. Quite obviously, the Desoto Hotel in the heart of town. This guy's been built and rebuilt several times. The original building went up in 1834. It opened as a luxury resort on New Year's Day in 1890. Down the street, the Bryce Hotel served as a cotton storage once upon a time. Later, a Coca-Cola bottling plant before it became a Holiday Inn in 1982. Of course, there is the history of the old Pink House, which dates back to the colonial era. Then there's Leopold's Ice Cream at Gwinnett and Habersham in the Victorian District. The original location goes back 100 years. Most people don't know that this spot on Broughton Street is only about a decade old. We could go on and on. The examples are everywhere. And you must be thinking at this point, what exactly does all of this have to do with food? Ha! Of course it has to do with food. We've spent months talking about bringing you an episode of our show that highlights some of the history across the South. There's so much, we couldn't narrow it down to just 3 or 4 spots. I mean, here in Savannah alone, we could feature 10. When you get Charleston involved, maybe Augusta, and you've got a boatload of history to discuss. So, we decided to break it up a little bit. Today, you will see 3 historic buildings housing some pretty good food, and we'll share the stories behind them. After the first of the year, we'll take you on that road trip. Sound good? Okay, let's eat. When it comes to food, there is no region in America more diverse than the South. It's a melting pot many times impossible to describe in a single bite. I'm Jesse Blanco. A 23-year career in TV news took me all over the South and introduced me to the people who make this corner of America what it is. For the last few years, we've been exploring the South's culinary diversity and sharing it with you. Savannah and Hilton Head Island is where I call home. But that's only the beginning of where we will eat it and like it.
Shuck It, an Eat It and Like It podcast, available now at eatitandlikeit.com and iTunes.
Savannah is changing. She's growing. She's maturing faster, really, than at any point in her storied history. Food brings us together. Food brings back memories. Food opens the door to other worlds far away without ever having to leave. So it's not just what you eat, maybe the people and the places that made an average meal unforgettable. We've got a front row seat. Why? Because it's always better when you eat it and like it. The history in this city quite obviously extends out beyond the traditional historic district. That's what everyone comes looking for in Savannah. But a quick ride and a car of your choice away, you find an obviously not nearly as old neighborhood known as Starland. The old Starland Dairy gets all the attention when it comes to this part of town. That opened way back in 1909. There are plans to restore this space, but there have been talks about that for quite a while. For now, time will tell. Atlantic, one of our signature restaurants on Victory Drive, it was originally a service station about 100 or so years ago. A block up from that is probably the biggest old converted building into a restaurant in the area. El Coyote hasn't even been open a year at this point, but it's already one of the most popular spots south of downtown. Chef in charge, his name is Landon Thompson. Darn happy to be here.
Oh my God. Obviously it's gorgeous, it's got amazing bones, it's been here forever. It's one of the coolest buildings and one of the best build outs, I think, as far as the structure, that you have to work with here. It's certainly not the most efficient build out as a restaurant. There's a lot of angles, a lot of triangles, and those aren't necessarily great in kitchens. But we've overcome most of that stuff. I never thought that this would be what my first restaurant looked like. I was thinking like a shanty on the side of the road or a food truck more than this giant 3 full built out spaces.
Landon's a Georgia boy, born in Macon, raised in Columbus. Made a name for himself as a chef in Atlanta, where in 2015 he was named a James Beard Award semifinalist during a 3-year run at a very popular Atlanta eatery called Cooks and Soldiers. Landon opened Cooks and Soldiers, helped mold it into one of that city's most popular. Still, the plan all along was for him to eventually do his own thing.
That was definitely part of the deal. That was part of the deal when I first met Fred Castellucci. I said I want to work for myself. That is really my only long-term goal. And we kind of made a deal where, if they would teach me about the business side of things, and I would help teach the business about the food side of things.
That opportunity came when one of his best friends, who was already here in Savannah, Tony Seacrest from the very popular Wild Dock Bar, told him this space was for sale. You may recognize it as its original, the Florence, celebrity chef Hugh Atchison's Italian concept that closed after a few years. Landon came down, took a look, and was hooked.
I believe it was originally constructed in 1849. That's at least the earliest date that I've heard. It's hard to find information on its, original building, but it was, I believe, originally called the Savannah Ice Company. They made, huge blocks of ice back before freezing and refrigeration was readily available.
Great bones it has. You see those everywhere. They added some color to the space, hung some lighting up, and opened a fantastic Mexican concept. Not your local Taco Tuesday kind of way, a little more craftsmanship, a little more attention to detail on these dishes.
The quesadillas are really popular. We put on a steak dish and a local pork chop from Grassroots. People really enjoy, but still people come in and crush tacos, yeah.
That is what you'll find here at El Coyote. Nothing you can't pronounce, only stuff you will love. Their carne asada, a beautiful dish, served with avocado slices and 2 tortillas. What you see is what you get and what you will eat in life.
I know was a glass making company for a while. We've actually got a glass tile that Tony's mom Gemma found at a local antique store, I think at the Pickers up here, but it's this big thick glass tile about that big that was produced here. So after ice they went to glass. It's almost similar as those things look, It sat empty for quite a while.
Upstairs they have a wild-like raw bar. When the weather's cooperating, you can hop outside on their deck and enjoy a cool beer and a cool breeze. In the back, there's a ramen bar, smallish but effective if you need something to warm those bones on a cold winter's night. They've made great use of this space here at El Coyote. The guys are slowly finding their niche as more and more people find them.
I field phone calls constantly, meet people around town, and some people, everyone kind of has their own feel for town. So I've got kind of a handful of ways I tell them to get here, and usually one of them clicks. If they're downtown people, I use the Whitaker route and say, take Whitaker. If you blow through that stop sign, you'll end up with your car at our bar, and we can give you a drink there. You usually see old Cody the Coyote up here, through the window.
Take the time to find them. There's a parking garage out back, but once you get here, fascinating to see how much history you are surrounded by. And oh yeah, you will eat it and like it. I'm Jesse Blanco, and you are watching Eat It and Like It.
America's Second Harvest is a lot about hope. And it's about being able to make sure that people have hope. We are the safety net for people that live below the poverty level, that live with food insecurity.
Of all the buildings we will discuss during this television show, none of them will evoke the emotion that this one will. If you've been around long enough or spent any kind of time running around downtown Savannah, then you know it all too well. It sits down at the end of Broughton Street, not physically at the end, but down at the corner of Broughton and Price, where Broughton as a shopping street essentially comes to an end. For the last couple of years, it's been a restaurant. Certainly not the first time it has been so.
As soon as we actually saw the property, we knew that we definitely wanted a restaurant.
Tasha Horton is Director of Sales and Marketing for the Gaslight Group, a group that owns a few spots around town, including the very popular Matthews Eatery on Bay Street. She tells us when they looked at this space, they knew it was going to be beautiful. The neighborhood perked up and everyone had an opinion.
We actually first heard that this was going to be called the pharmacy because originally we were told it was a pharmacy, which kind of led us into a little bit of background work.
The renovation began. The paperwork all said the pharmacy. That was going to be the original name of this place. 3 or 4 months into that renovation, the plan changed. The more they were told stories about what the space used to be, the more curious Tasha became, until the decision was made to go back as far as they could.
Pharmacy seemed like a great name. At the same time, it made us, question a little bit, like what exactly has the building been through? And we decided to go to the Georgia Historical Society and really dig into things. Just one day in there. Of course, internet searching, libraries, tons of stuff on the computer. But there, basically, it was an all-day process, just pulling every single book that we possibly could.
It was at that point that it all came together.
Originally, this was a provision store. So in 1898, it became one of the original grocers. Hence, with the mural, you'll actually see some of the things in the background that they sold. So you have your barrels and your biscuits and things like that. That's where East End Provisions came from. So originally a provision store, that's actually what this was the longest. That was from 1898 until the 1940s.
That's quite a long time. Some Savannians remember a higher-end French restaurant in this space called the Firehouse, named because of some rumor that the space was once a firehouse, which is just not true.
It was a dry cleaner for 10 years. Between all this, it sat vacant many, many times, but most people recognize it as Juarez. So here for 18 years, many Savannians have stories. It was 18 years and sat vacant too before we actually purchased it.
The last spot she mentioned is what this building was most known for over the years, almost 2 decades. It was a Mexican restaurant called Juarez. At one time, the most popular Mexican restaurant in town, and second place wasn't even close. It is what people still talk about here.
They love the history. When you walked into the old Juarez, there was a big, huge mural. It was probably one of the ugliest things anyone had seen, but it was a conversation piece. So this was our way to put part of history on the wall while still having that conversation piece. The actual mural is when you walked into this building in the early 1900s. So people love to hear the history.
Replacing that mural is this one, the original photo they were given, reflecting that it was a provision store. Now, East End Provisions is a great neighborhood spot where most of their patrons walk to. The renovation took a little bit longer than they expected, cost a little bit more than they wanted, but what they've got is beautiful, frankly, one of the most attractive spaces on Broughton Street. The menu, approachable and comfortable. We're told their most popular item at lunch is this wood-fired grilled chicken sandwich, or the beet salad with grilled shrimp added. At dinner, filet Oscar rules the roost. It's what makes it one of the more popular spots in the neighborhood, which is all they wanted to begin with.
But in the end, we're back to our original concept. This is a place that's going to be family friendly.
Any photo they could find, they printed, enlarged, and added to the walls. Walls that would have a story or two to tell, if only they could talk.
Lots of hard work, but at the same time, fun. You're looking at a building that was built in 1898. We were able to pull different artifacts, see things that were here, kind of come up with our own story, but reading it in books was interesting as well.
Shuck It, an Eat It and Like It podcast, available now at eatitandlikeit.com and iTunes.
Here in the heart of town, where quite obviously the majority of our visitors gather to look around and take in the sights, you have an area we know today as City Market. Really, it's tourist central. Reality is, for the most part, these buildings have been around for over a century. Some shops, some restaurants. This guy here, the restaurant's been around since 1997.
It was originally built in 1902 for the Savannah Hebrew congregation. It was their offices, from what I understand. They sold it to the Belford family in 1913.
Andy Gromay is general manager of Belford's Seafood and Steaks, a popular restaurant down at the end of City Market, directly across the walkway from good old Vinnie Van Gogo's, Savannah's epicenter for pizza. Andy moved down here to Savannah once upon a time to retire from the restaurant business up in New York City. His path a little bit different than the average retiree.
Originally moved to Charleston, bought a place there and was there 4 months, came here for her birthday weekend, stayed at the mansion, had a fabulous weekend. Driving back to Charleston, I looked at her, I said, we screwed up, right? Wrong city. She goes, absolutely.
4 months later, they'd sold their house and moved here, to the beach on Tybee Island. During a trip into town, he came into Belford's.
Well, I loved the concept. I loved where it was in City Market, the hustle bustle, and one look at the facility and one look at the menu. And
so Andy came on board to lend a helping hand, offer his experience in improving the menu, keep costs under control, and overall make for a better Belford's. It is working, has been working. The dishes coming out of here are as good looking as any you will find in the city. Steaks are prime. Crab cakes, without question, they're most popular.
Well, the crab cakes, which we're absolutely known for, and we got a great display, and we serve it in many different variations. Our shrimp greens and grits are very popular. All our dishes, the side dishes are all Southern enhanced. We're doing succotash, we do sweet potato mash here, and we mix it up and move it around, whatever. But it's definitely a Southern flair to the menu.
While the food is keeping their customers happy, Andy will tell you it's the history of the building that many times get people to stop, overwhelmingly so. You see, in 1913, the building was sold to the Belford family. They made it a grocery store, one of the largest in town, down at the end of City Market, Savannah's hub of commerce at the time.
The actual market, which was on Ellis Square, was thriving all through those years into the 50s, I believe, when it was torn down. Feed, seed, grain, and produce warehouses, including this building was used as that for a while as well. So this was that grocery store, I believe, until the 60s. And then
When did it become a restaurant?
in the 70s, there was several restaurants, and it became Belford's in 97.
The pictures line the walls in this restaurant, photos provided by the family.
There's a photograph in the main dining room of the Belford family, all the children, and then the original Mr. Belford who had the grocery store. And the little boy in the front of the picture is still alive, and he comes in every 3-4 months for a lunch, whatever. Not connected with the restaurant anymore, but he just, it's his name on the door, so he kind of comes in and enjoys himself, whatever. So it's amazing how many people come and snap in pictures of the pictures. It's interesting. It's a different fact. People walk in here, they ooh and ah of the building. I mean, you got these arch windows, you got these brick walls, you got this fabulous patio. I mean, we get a lot of oohs and ahs before they even hit their table.
The space is beautiful, especially if you look at it through the eyes of what it used to be, a grocery store. The servers get asked all the time about the history of the space. They're required to know, at the very least, the story that is told on the menu, but most of them know so much more. Andy believes that's part of the charm here at Belford's.
The one thing that has not changed here, which I loved, is the fact that all I hear is comments about how wonderful your staff is, how gracious, and how welcoming, whatever. Because that impressed me in my early observations, and we've been able to maintain that. You turn staff over, you get different people, yet that has always remained a constant, and we're sticklers on that.
Jesse Blanco's hair care provided by Monica at B Street Salon, downtown Savannah.
Thanks so much for taking the time to join us here this week for our show and some of the history of the buildings where we find ourselves eating and liking around Savannah. There are so many, we could probably do an entire series on the spots around town whose buildings have stories to tell. Alas, we are out of time. You want to watch it again? Find it right now at eatitandlikeit.com. We'll see you next week.
Eat it and like it.